How It Is by Samuel Beckett. It's a 1961 novel. It is a very stream of consciousness kind of, quite reminiscent of Joyce, especially like his earlier stuff with Beckett. I'm thinking More Picks Than Kicks that I believe came out in the 30s, and I think that was his first, Beckett's first novel. And so How It Is has an interesting structure or lack thereof. A lot of people come in looking for, well, maybe not if you know anything about Beckett. And even I feel like I don't know all that much about him sometimes, as much as I do. I mean, I think I've read so, Endgame, Waiting for Godot, obviously. More picks and then this, and I think maybe one other thing I might be missing, but four or five at the best. Anyway, but yeah, I am slowly working through his stuff, and just like I am with a lot of other stuff. And so going into this, I kind of half expected that there wouldn't be a lot of structure in a traditional way. And in a modernist sense, which is interesting because modernism being a pretty broad term, it could include anything from the art of Pablo Picasso, from his early, stuff from 1920s to the 30s, or it could be anything from the works of Virginia Woolf or Proust to Joyce. And it probably include Beckett in that camp, but he was also in a part of a post-war kind of the theater of the absurd, I believe, with a lot of the stuff. He wrote a lot of dramaturgy or dramas, and he was a good, pretty prolific playwright. But he also wrote prose and fiction, and he was pretty diverse realm of creative exports, and this is one of them. So before How It um, is narrated by an unnamed narrator who relays to the audience three stages. He divides it into, and he introduces it with the first part, which is before Pim. Pim, Pim, is almost like a shorthand kind of name. It's a person, kind of a nameless person that we don't really know a lot about. We don't know a lot about what's going on. Either way, an unreliable narrator, obviously. Um, but anyway, so it's quite simple to remember. This is probably the only part that kind of made sense, actually. Before Pim, number one, with Pim, and then after Pim. So, you know, presiding a priori Pim, and then I guess the present moment, and then a posteriori, I guess you would say. I'm maybe overthinking that part, but yeah, the kind of exegesis that he gives, because he's this guy narrating it is very agitated, and he's very on edge, and he seems like guilty of something, and he's hiding so much, but he's also revealing certain aspects of himself too. And the only thing I garnered was that he was running through this land that's full of muck and mire. So he's just completely mud. He's running through the mud. He's covered in mud. He's running through, and there's a lot of of repetition of like words. He repeats himself. It's a very stream of consciousness, is where Joyce comes in. This like it's kind of like then I went here, then I went there, and then great tracts of land. That's another thing he said over and over and over again, to the point where it's actually kind of tiring. I was like, oh no, he's not going to say this again, is he? Great tracts of land from my bottom left, or his I can't remember what he kept referring to the bottom part or something, some part of him that was like that couldn't move, I think, or I can't remember what he said, but it was kind of like um, paralyzed maybe. But it's hard to separate the real from the unreal, which is why he's so unreliable. But he's um, in his dark, turgid, muddy land, and we don't know where he is, how he got there, and it's everything. And this is why Endgame too is really great, because you start off, it's like not knowing anything. You're going to it, and then the layers are slowly peeled away, and then you're like, oh, this is what's going on. It's like it's a cyclical thing. It's like there's a weird ritual going on. I think I did a review for that. There's a lot more that meets the eye that Beckett is getting at, hinting at, without uh, well, that's how he does it, is obliquely, but without explicitly revealing, like, oh yes, this is what's going on. Because sometimes people feel like they need to understand, So that's just what I think. Modernism still, it's like it's structureless in a way, but it also has a structure in the fact that it doesn't have a structure, I guess. So this is like, before Pym, this narrator's talking about some of little glimpses of like a character of his life, of a woman that was very strictly like religious, I believe, kind of puritanical. Um, the only other thing you remember is just having a sack and having it, and having like a can opener, and then with Pym is the time that the narrator has kind of almost a weird kind of by not a symbiotic, like the opposite of symbiotic, kind of a parasitic relationship, but it's like a kind of weirdly, like he has a weird feelings for him. It's almost like he cares for Pym, but then he ends up actually torturing Pym, tormenting him, basically doing stuff like hitting him with the can opener, I believe, and then he's basically kind of repressing, or like hitting him, punching him, doing certain things to get him. Often he's wishes for Pym to sing. That's another thing. So yeah, and then there's another character of Bom, Bom, who I don't think he's basically trying to get details about Bom through Pym, and then after Pym is when the narrator goes back to this the muddy darkness, and then there's all these different kinds of things, and lots of different weird kinds of I guess you would say like logical fallacies that he partakes in. Some of them are the ad hoc, others like he hints at, or rather explicitly states that there are more like him and Pym that are in need of help, and that that for whatever he's coming from, it's like a very it's very it's not obvious, but it is it's definitely clear that there are people suffering, and that it's whatever it is, it's this place isn't a pretty place to be, and that you wouldn't want to wish this upon your worst nightmare. So one thing I would say is that there are some aspects of it that were a little bit like, I felt like the stream of conscious narrative was a little bit too like slogging, and that it took a while, like it kept kind of recoursing, and it was a little bit sinuous, like it would go this way, then it would come rebounding. And now I get that as it's obviously it's just trying to be it's trying to be purposely non-linear, but at the same time, in doing so, I felt like it was a little bit like excessive. I think for me, at least, it wasn't a fun read. I felt like it was like I was like feeling the kind of hellish nightmare, which is probably what Beckett was intended. Obviously, I think I should get this by now, but it's kind of down to the, I guess, the subjective personal experience of what I take away. And the takeaway from me was that it was kind of frustrating, maddening, and turgid, very kind of just over and over again repetitions of excuse me repetitions of before Pym, after Pym, this and that, and that's what happens when you're like kind of think about things, and there's like a resurgence of the same kind of thoughts. The thoughts are linear, in a sense. Maybe there's some kind of Nietzschean truth to that. Like thoughts have their life and their remains, and forgetfulness is a funny thing, how we communicate, and especially when it's just like kind of thoughts that we think, so if you're, I think, as it was very realistic in that sense, kind of a heightened realism. That's why I think like it's absurd too. It's like a theater of the absurd again, but at the same time, these are events that could very well happen as well. There's kind of a commentary on what's going on in the world, like kind of like, yeah, like especially if you watch like like questioning what's happening in the war and all that. So especially if you live through two of them, like World War I and II. So I just want to leave off with a quote here from How It Is. So this is from the narrator, obviously. All I hear, leave out more, leave out all. Here, no more, lie in my arms, and ancient without end. We're talking of me, and without end that buries all mankind. At the last cunt, they'd be good for moments in the dark. Oops, I didn't realize there was a they'd be moments in the dark, in the mud, hearing nothing, saying nothing, capable of nothing, nothing. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And kind of in the spirit of what he was talking about, no, unbroken, no paragraphs, no commas, not a second for. And yeah, that kind of sums up like that's kind of, it's almost one long, unbroken sentence. Anyway, so that is How It Is by Samuel Beckett, and thanks for watching.